Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, marketing, content, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Rand Fishkin. I don't need show notes to introduce Rand. He is the CEO of SparkToro. He's one of the OG online marketers. He's one of the people whose writings I read when I was first starting my marketing career and getting into the field. I've been a fan and a friend of Rand for a long time. We are really lucky to have him on the show. He's also an author. If you don't know, what we're going to talk about his book, Lost and Founder. Anyway, Rand, welcome and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Adam. Good to join you.
And so, Rand, to start off, a lot of our audience does exactly what you do. They market to marketers, whether internally for their ideas or externally to clients for a new pitch on something. And so this is something you've done for a long time. So I'm curious on thoughts from any lessons over the years, maybe some of the things you learned that are the most persuasive when marketing to marketers, whether it's a new technology, a new idea, because this is sort of your MO throughout your career that you've been doing probably longer than most people listening to this.
Yeah. That's a great question. You know what, Adam? I rarely get that one, and you're right. That is something I've done for 20 plus years. I would say one particularly interesting thing about the field of marketing is that it is surprisingly personality driven. So this, and I'm sure you've observed the same thing over the course of your career, which is that there are, in any given subsector of the marketing field, there are a handful of individual human beings, like thought leaders, to which thousands or tens of thousands of people in that sector pay close attention. And so I've seen over the course of my career, most saliently, I would say, in my first company, Moz, when a few thought leaders in the field that Moz served, which was SEO, right, like helping people rank in Google, when a few of the big thought leaders in that field started switching away from Moz and using some of our competitors' products, right? I was the CEO, founder at the time, and I could see it in our numbers. I could feel it in the environment. I could see the sort of the winds of change, feel how we were falling behind. Tragically, I was never able to turn around the product and engineering team there, but it was directly observable and quite a surprise, right? I thought that there would be more nuance and more different sources of influence, but the right 20 people on stages around the world, on their podcasts, on their YouTube channels, in their, at the time, Twitter feeds, that made a huge difference. So marketing is more personality driven than I think most people believe.
So that's a really interesting answer. And now you're going to force me to scroll down to another question I have, because we're now going to skip around in my questions. Because you said something really interesting where there's this small group that has kind of outsized influence for marketers. And I think audience research is super underrated for B2B. And there's like so much alpha in finding what that small group is for your industry and sort of figuring out how to work with them, whatever way that might be. And it's not that many people. Anyway, I guess this leads me to my product question is, can you share some of like the unexpected or just really cool ways that people are using SparkToro to either find those people or how to influence them once they found them because they knew their attributes better? Any way you want to take that question.
Yeah. So surprisingly, Adam, we did research recently into how people were using SparkToro, and it is different than you might expect. So I don't know how you personally use it, but one of the things that I do with it is I will go in and say, I'm helping a friend in a sector like I was helping a friend this morning in the cocktail industry. Like he's a sort of famous bartender guy. Anyway, so I'm searching around for like people who have mixology in their profile, or search for like cocktail bars or whatever. And then I look at the actual list of social accounts that influence those people, that audience, what they pay attention to, and I'm sort of marking them off and making a little list. But that is not what a lot of our users and customers do. A lot of them go to the popular social networks. They might take a sample set of the ones that appear, the particular individual people, social accounts that are influential. They screenshot them, they put them in a presentation, and then they're trying to make the pitch to their boss, their team, their client to just get some investment. Like, please, person who works with me, believe that this is a real thing. I just need to prove to you that there are influential individual humans, because to your point, I think there's this belief that B2B is not an influencer or human personality driven field, but some of it very much is. And you can see that in the SparkToro data, which is quite cool. And it was interesting for us to see that people use it more for strategy than for tactics. So there you go.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
so this actually leads into my next question. You're just going to lead into all my questions because you're hitting all my keywords here. I was watching one of the recent videos you posted where you were talking about budgeting and attribution and like how difficult it was for marketers in today's environment where, things are changing really fast. And, I watched the video and I've been in the room where it was hard to get budget and people were fighting for attribution. And then I've been in the room at companies where they're totally bought into marketing. I have full control of everything. And I guess my question is this a marketing problem, or is this like a trust and maybe even political problem within the organization? And what I mean by that is, if you're arguing over dollars and, hey, can we run this program? Have you already kind of lost? Or is this something that's just an ongoing fight? Because I feel like I've been on both sides, and I feel like whenever I've been fighting, it just hasn't worked out well for me at the company. And the companies that are like, Adam, you have not a blank check, but whatever you asked for, we're going to give you, has just gone really well.
Yeah, I think, let's see, I would say that culture, I bet this is your experience too, Adam, like that culture fit of trust but verify on one side, or distrust everything, and until I get irrefutable, incontrovertible proof of every single thing, I will make no investments. And it's a spectrum, right? And people can fall, cultures can fall, companies can fall anywhere along those lines. And my experience is that as long as you're not in the far quadrant of I distrust everything and I believe nothing and that kind of world, it's always possible to nudge someone more in the direction of trust me. I think when you make an early hire or you are making a new investment, you're trying something for the first time, there's a distinct pathway that trust process follows. And I'm less trusting. I need more evidence. I need more proof. Things have to go better at the start for me to believe that this is real. And then over time, I start to trust either a channel or a tactic or a strategy or a person in my organization, and I just let them run free, right? And that is probably what a lot of marketers experience with their own clients and teams and bosses, is that spectrum and that process. Here's what I would say. It is your job fundamentally to your boss, your team, your client to bring the evidence to make those charts and graphs and presentations and videos and show those examples and bring up visuals of competitors who are investing in tactics that you want to invest in and showing them how the return on investment is correlated. Maybe it's not causal and can't be proved, but you know what? Correlation is a strong signal and there's multiple competitors doing all of that work is part of your job. It might not seem like it because it's not in the job spec, right? It's not in what your boss expects of you, but it's what you should expect of yourself. And that experience is far more prevalent the larger an organization gets, and it's far more prevalent the less trusting and less good experience having in the past the organization has had.
Totally. And you mentioned large companies. I think that's one of the reasons I'm really happy at startups and agencies versus my time at Google is the fact that I basically can run whatever programs I want. I'm trusted to do it. I don't have to go through legal. I was at a fintech company for a while, which was a startup. And even they had to go through, FINRA, their regulatory body. Meanwhile, they're getting killed by crypto companies that can go promote whatever they want, which is
oh my God, right.
It's like asymmetric warfare.
Yeah.
But I think, knowing who you are as a marketer, like I watched your video about budgeting and, marketers maybe having to ask for things. And I'm like, gosh, I kind of don't miss the big company thing, and respect to the people who can sit through all the meetings and, get everything they want checked off versus, hey, you're running the show at a startup. And you're right. The smaller the company, generally the more freedom you're going to have. So Rand, you talked a little bit about, team members and hiring, or maybe I imagine that since that's my next question. I'm personally impressed, not just by your companies, but by your teams. You hire amazing, extraordinary people. We've had Amanda on the show before. She was so great. She's a personal favorite marketer of mine. I love all her thoughts. I love her zero-click marketing concept. Everything she does is great. So not at all a hard question. What have you learned building teams that might help brands finding outlier marketing talent? Not at all hard to answer. How do I find an Amanda?
Yeah. So I did not recruit Amanda. Amanda pitched us on joining SparkToro, which I think is quite interesting. And I'm not sure there's a scalable lesson there, but I did discover something in my hiring for Snack Bar Studio, my other company, which is an indie video game developer. And in that company, I've had to hire, all eight individual team members. And I would say, I think that the importance of the talent fit, culture fit, process, the writing of the job ad, the process by which you do the hiring, like making that comfortable, and looking at fields where you can offer something very unique that is appealing to the kind of people that you want to hire. Like every little detail of those things goes into getting extraordinary talent. And I have had plenty of fails over the years. I found in my experience at Moz, which I hired technically hundreds of people, but usually it was managers under me hiring people. I think that I would recommend, until you get to a few hundred people, that the founder, if possible, is involved deeply in every part of that hiring process. That is not something I would ever outsource again. I hope to never run a company that's more than 100 people again also. So, side note, but I would put that, I would make that a key part of the founder's job. I think that's the most intense work that I do, is on the hiring side, because it dictates the strengths and weaknesses of the organization. Like, it determines whether you have a company of people that you love working with and trust, and can overcome sort of difficulties and challenges. I don't know. We could spend a whole podcast talking about like individual tactical things that I would learn, but the overarching advice that I would have is, don't let that go. Don't let it be something that you outsource or do with someone else. But do be willing to be flexible in changing. This didn't work last time. Hey, we're going to change up how we do the job ads. Hey, we're going to change up our interview process. Hey, we're going to change up the questions that we ask. Hey, we're going to change up how we present our culture. Maybe we didn't fully explain how this type of work is, what the expectations are in the organization, or what the communication style is in the organization, or how we work together. That kind of stuff is so much more important than you think it is. And you cannot expect someone to come in and, especially later stage professionals, right? People who've been in many organizations, more senior folks, you can't expect them to drop into any environment and succeed. There's no such thing. I don't believe in A players. There is no such thing as an A player. Throw that idea out of your mind. There are A fits, meaning this person is a great fit for this organization and they do great work there and you get A results, A level results. But I have seen time and again, Adam, I have let people go, been like, that person is not performing. They are not, whatever. They're not even a B player. I think they're, way down low. And then I've seen them go to other companies and crush it, absolutely rock. And my realization was, that it wasn't them. It was the fit between them and us. Right? It wasn't me either. I don't blame like myself or my organization. I don't think like, I messed up. In some cases I did. What it was the fit. So I think the other piece of advice I'd have here, probably quite salient, is you got to be willing to be flexible and recognize that you'll make mistakes. Forgive yourself. Don't hold it against the person. Don't get angry or upset or frustrated. Hey, this person isn't performing. They're just not doing it. Like, what am I doing wrong? Hey, you know what? It's a giant economy. We have one of the historic low unemployment rates that we've had in the last 100 years in the United States. It's okay to let somebody go and go find their bliss somewhere else. Pay them a generous severance. Move on. Hire somebody new. Great. Last piece of advice: SparkToro has 3 people working for it.
You guys punch way above your weight.
Yeah, we punch way above our weight because we hire a lot of contractors and agencies and people to do, everything from like taxes and finance to UI and graphic design and UX and brand and customer research. Right? We use Demand Maven, Asia Arangio. Like we have all these contractors who help us do all these different things. Occasionally I'll have a project like, Casey, I need to design these like LLM prompts for this thing, blah, 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 blah. Can I just hire somebody? It's like, okay, yeah, go do that, right? So I love contracting. It is wonderful. I think that for some reason, the tech world especially is so anti-contractor agency, and it's just dumb. Agencies are awesome, man.
Yeah, we use agencies for specific work, and you find someone who's really good at that, one job you need, that's a great use of time rather than, figuring out internally. Or if someone can just do something better, why would you not use that resource? We're fans too.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit. You and Amanda both talked a lot about zero-click marketing. Since our company sells out-of-home ads and billboards, we're big believers in this. In fact, I've had some guests on the show that are like slightly apoplectic that marketers were ever so obsessed with clicks. And anyway, this kind of gets us back to the old world of marketing, like kind of a return to form of a brand standing out, getting people to talk about you, seek you out, which kind of resists pure optimization and pure call to action everywhere. Because, Coca-Cola doesn't need to do that, right? And so I'm guessing, or I guess my question about this is, shouldn't marketers be excited about this instead of being fearful? Doesn't this get us back to like really what's purest creative work and doing things that are more like less like towards the end of the funnel and more towards actually building a company and a brand and user love?
Yeah, look, man, there is a messed up set of priorities inside a ton of companies, especially ones that haven't experienced the magic of brand. Like they haven't seen it and felt it. And so they're addicted to that loop of, financial like, let me go spend more on Google pay-per-click or on meta advertising or on, LinkedIn ads or whatever it is. And then I see more marketing qualified leads come into my funnel. And then I see more of those turn into sales. And look, if that practice is working for you and you don't mind giving the big tech companies 99 cents of every dollar you make, sure, like go for it, right? But you worked at Google, like, their goal is basically to take the margin from every business, right? So that is their incentive. Let's find, all the businesses in the world, their profit margin is X. We want that to be X times 0.01, and then the 99 cents goes to us, right? Goes to us, Google. And they've been very effective at this. It's the monetization of attention that is super powerful. I think, very frankly, there's way more opportunity in sources of attention and influence that are outside of big tech's control, that can't be perfectly attributed, that don't show exactly their traffic impact, or are very, very difficult to measure. The harder it is to measure a marketing investment, the higher ROI that marketing investment is likely to be. Not universal, but 9 times out of 10, that has been my experience. You speak at a conference, you can't prove that any of the people in the audience came to you. You can make correlation. You can be like, but I know that person was there, and then later they signed up. Yeah, but you can't prove that had impact. Well, those things tend to be the highest return on investment things I've ever done. And it's weird coming from a background of kind of performance organic channels, right? Social media and SEO and content. And now here we are in this world where privacy regulation and ad blockers and cookie changes and what Apple did with cookies and all this, hundreds of different things have made attribution and measurement just so difficult, somewhere between difficult and impossible. And brand still works great. Coca-Cola is still crushing it with sales. And yeah, I will say this. I think one of the problems is a big part of brand investment is also product. And marketers don't get to touch product enough. If you don't bake marketing into your product, you are missing out on the biggest force multiplier in the field.
Totally. And you said something interesting. I love that quote. The less you can measure it, the higher impact it is, because you can't measure like a lot of the intangibles and user love. And I also think a lot of things marketing might not measure actually are more important than marketing to measure. And that could be like customer service satisfaction or like, speed to answer the phone if you are a phone based. But it's like a lot of things that marketing doesn't natively measure, if they're just obsessed with clicks and conversions and isn't looking at anything else. Well,
product stuff, like any product stuff, metric, right?
And it's just really interesting to me. I think like the companies that fully silo marketing are just never gonna get the same traction as the companies that let marketing have a seat at the product table and build like wonderful shareable packaging and make sure that users actually get really good support if something's broken or they're having issues. And it's like all of those things that if you are siloed, you don't get to touch. I think you're just at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah. Do you remember this? I think we were both in the sort of hacker news world, like at the same time. I want to say this was like maybe 2007, 8, 9, when Paul Graham was running Y Combinator. He's a semi-famous investor now, right? Who started Y Combinator. And on his blog, he wrote this kind of seminal piece in the startup world that's been quoted a million times called "Make Something People Want," which sounds like the most obvious advice in the world. But for some reason in the technology world, like it really caught on. Startups were obsessed with making something that people want. That became a rallying cry and a phrase that people use to sort of explain why some companies worked and why others failed. And I think it's not wrong advice today, but it's incomplete. It's incomplete because it misses the inclusion of marketing. If I were rewriting that today, I would write it as make something people want to talk about. You need not only a product that solves your user's problem, which is a really good thing, right? You should solve your customer's problem. You should do a great job of solving the problem. You should do a better job than all your competitors. But if you can do it in a way that makes people want to talk about the product and the problem and your solution and your company and rave about it to their friends, right? It triggers some emotional response that gives them a reason to share. Similarly to how, outrage content on social media gives people a reason to share and reply and comment and all that. If you can do that, you are going to have so much more success than if you merely build a product that is siloed from marketing that does a great job of solving your customers' problems. That would be that is like my biggest advice for any founder, creator, product person. If you're on a marketing team now and you can go and have the conversation with your leadership team and say, hey, can we work on making our product something people want to talk about, not just use to solve their problem, and get a yes, and now you can influence product, you will get multiples of return on investment on any marketing investment that you do.
And it seems like Silicon Valley both creates these brands that the world does talk about through, product driven growth, but at the same time, have you heard of this company called Cluey? It's it doesn't matter. It's this AI startup by some kids in Silicon Valley. Anyway, they're very thirsty for growth. So what they're doing is basically they're doing like black hat social media. They like pay a bunch of random influencers to like share their videos and make it go viral on various social sites. And they're trying to like astroturf popularity. And their videos are actually kind of creative. I actually don't mind the ads themselves, but the way like they openly publish like their like how they make things go viral. Anyway, it's kind of the sort of new guard of young marketers that look at how Mr. Beast does things and wants to make spectacle online.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have any words for like the young founders who, I guess the simple question is, who are just obsessed with any form of growth hack to grow, and kind of the opposite direction of having, marketing actually be part of product, more like marketing drives everything or product dies, and it's kind of maybe a little exploitive, maybe not. It's like a gray area. Any words of wisdom for young founders that are doing black hat social?
You know what this reminds me of? Well, two things. One is, my bartender buddy that I was talking about, Adam. He likes to tell stories from when he's serving people at his cocktail bar, and one of the things that he frequently says is, every new generation thinks that they invented sex. Like, they come into the bar and they're like, oh man, whatever. They have their private conversations that they think a bartender can't hear, but he works in a 12-seat bar, so he hears everything. And it'll be like, oh my God, these kids, they think that they're doing all these things and trying all these things for the first time, and that no person before them, no, person 10 years older than them has ever done it. I find the same thing is true with marketing. When I was young, when we were young, dude, I bet we probably sat in some bar somewhere and we're like, oh my God, these 30 and 40 something marketers, they just don't get it, man. Like, let me tell you, I can growth hack my way with Markov chaining and like getting, all these content pieces. I got tons of Google traffic, man. They don't even know. But you know what? That didn't build any brands. Not one Coca-Cola came out of my SEO spam days. not a single one. I think that the older I get, the more I realize that people who came before me knew what the hell they were doing, were on to something, clearly had tons of success in marketing, branding, advertising, whatever they did. And yeah, I think it's a rite of passage to, when you're 25 years old, dismiss everything that anyone older than you is doing. So let them have it. You know what? Go for it, kids. Spam your socials, do your Mr. Beast viral videos. Don't let me stop you. Go crazy. In 10 years, you'll realize, oh my God, that was so embarrassing. I can't believe we did that. What were we thinking? And you'll come around. It's fine. And I don't mind waiting in the meantime.
Yeah, I tend to find any sort of fast, cheap marketing really only works for fast, cheap products. So if you're selling funny t-shirts, yeah, you might build like a small lifestyle business off it,
Right.
but you're never going to get people to, buy your B2B software or, make a major purchase if the marketing itself like connotates spam or grifting or low quality. Like, you just don't want to be associated with it. And I think users are smarter than some marketers give them credit. Like, they can sniff that out. They're not going to want to support a company that, does odd things, that sends them strange messages. I think that it really only works for a certain type of product.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, every generation does have a significant advantage over their predecessors, which is that they understand current youth culture. And that is, if you are selling current youth culture to current youths, that is a helpful, useful thing. And if you are trying to reach broader demographics and psychographics, just be aware that it tends to work less well. I would also say lifestyle businesses rock. They are fantastic. I love them to pieces. I think that term is used pejoratively by a lot of Silicon Valley and tech world in general, because very frankly, venture capitalists want anyone who's got talent and ambition to work for them, right? And try and build a $1 billion company. And they need 1,000 people trying to build a $1 billion company because 999 of them are going to fail. And so, they want you to try and be one of those as well. You don't need to listen. It is wonderful to have a small business that is personal, that makes something, artisanal, that makes something for a small group of people, but that does it well. It's not so great to have a small business that relies on growth hacks, because the trend is always the same. A hack works for a short period of time until it gets abused, and then it stops working. And unless you can find the next growth hack that's definitely going to work for your business tends to die. That is why you see so few companies that you can point to from any time in history that started with sketchy growth hacky stuff. There's a handful of beverage brands that started in the 1920s during Prohibition that definitely did shady stuff, brewing bathtub gin in Canada and bringing it over the border or whatever. Sure, you can point to a few, what was it, the Dropbox double referral code thing that everybody likes to point to in Silicon Valley. You can find a few, but it is vanishingly uncommon.
Speaking of beverage brands, I think Liquid Death is a really good example of recent marketing that it's great brand marketing. It actually drove people into store. People actually seek it out and purchase it. And everything they do is just wonderful. It's like, it's hard to find anyone who like hates fun who doesn't like love that brand. I mean, you have to hate fun to not like Liquid Death. And the founders are cool too. Like, if you go and look at their social profiles, they post just like you and I do. They don't they don't sound like, boring corporate people. Not that all corporate people are boring, but they actually sound like humans on social. And it's great. You just mentioned beverage brands. I just always promote Liquid Death as a company having fun online. Here's
what I think Liquid Death does really well. They are not afraid to turn off a large segment of the audience in order to activate another segment. So I for example, I was not familiar with the brand. Amanda clued me into like what they were doing, but I remember posting probably a few years ago something that was very negative about them. Basically, I think I posted something like, this is obviously just bro culture in a can. And Amanda was like, yeah, it sort of is, but it's a little more authentic than that. Like, and it's more nuanced than that too. It's not just, hey, let's make the label look like poison or, whatever it is, or oh, we're so hardcore. And I think that was one of the wake up calls for me around consumer branding and the power of saying, hey, we don't care if 70% of people who see this think it's gross and weird and sucks and aren't even going to try it. If the 30% of people who are our exact target market absolutely freaking love it. And clearly they're, people like yourself do. I think this is one of the things that so few brands are willing to do. They are so scared of controversy, so scared of turning off even a small segment of their audience, that they won't take a risk, right? Like, Hollywood movies or whatever, superhero blockbusters, like they won't dare to take even a tiny little risk of a political stance, in their messaging because, oh my God, we might not get as many people to the theater. You know what? Turns out 77 versus 79 million Americans is politics. Like, hey, be willing to take a stand. Do something creative with your branding. Do something unusual that's going to turn off some people and bring others in. I I think controversy is a not a growth hack. I think it's a superpower, an underinvested one.
Yeah, and I also like them because they're a purple cow. Like their Liquid Death is a purple cow. Seth Godin said how to do this a while ago, and your purple cow could be the product or controversy or any of these things. And like so few companies do it. You mentioned movie industries not taking
Superhero
risks.
movies.
And I've had some media people on the podcast previously, and I've asked them about the notion of stuck culture. Like, why can't there be new franchises? Why do we have to do all these reboots? And it really boils down to it's a very management consultant McKinsey mindset, and they run the numbers. And even sometimes they know it's at the end, but they're like, but the math makes sense. But I think people, even in that industry, are starting to get it. And we're seeing like a resurgence in more like A24 is a great studio that does like smaller budget flicks, and they're wonderful. And they're not superhero movies. They do all sorts of horror, and they just did comedy. And I'm optimistic we're getting through the sort of management consultant world where hopefully it's not just superhero sequels forever. We can make new superheroes that are, that are from the culture of today, and they don't have to necessarily annoy people of the past by being a certain thing or not being a certain thing. And wouldn't that be great just to invent some new things? And
I'll tell you what I love, man. What I love, Adam, is how at this particular point in human history, which we're probably nearly at peak population, right, of the planet, and then we're going to be going down significantly, probably, for the next few hundred years after you and I pass away, humanity will be shrinking for a long time, which is, for some people, like they're very scared of that and they don't want it. I don't view it that way. I think it might be beautiful too. But the great thing about this, like, incredibly huge macroeconomic environment that we exist in is there are so many riches in so many niches, right? Like, whatever your thing is, you can find people who are super into it. It can be so tiny, seem like such a little weird world, and yet you can find those 1,000 true fans and the 10,000 people who will buy and the 100,000 people who will talk about it. And this is why I think what are pejoratively called lifestyle businesses, small $1 to $10 million a year companies, have so much potential. It's such an exciting time to try and build those kinds of things, to work for those kinds of companies, to help those kinds of companies. At SparkToro, like, what we are unabashed about being weird on a bunch of vectors. Like, we will not do demos, right? Like, if you write in and say, hey, can you give me a demo of SparkToro? We'll write back and be like, we're a tiny team of 3. If we said yes to these, we would never do anything else. The product would never get any better. Like, we can't. And so we write back and are like, hey, here's all these resources. You can watch these videos. You don't have to schedule anything. If somebody has a particular question, like, we'll go make a video from those questions and answer those things. We are unabashedly sort of cultural and political with ourselves. You can see there's a trans flag behind me and a Black Lives Matter sign. They're old. Like, I've had them up there for years behind me because I don't mind turning off certain people, and I'm happy to, like, attract other kinds of people who fit with the world that we believe in and want to build, right? And that can be a beautiful thing too. It's about identifying the culture and subculture and types of customers and types of audience that you're going to really resonate with, and then doing one of those things that youth culture is really good at, which is identifying the through lines and speaking their language to them. This is one of the other parts of audience research, right? You got to know your people so that you can speak to them.
Yeah, so I love that answer, and you know what? From like a company perspective, if anyone's annoyed because of how someone at the company thinks, who cares anyway? You know that like we're all individuals. Everyone has their own belief systems, and you know what? It's wonderful that we can have a culture with people who believe lots of things. So Rand, one final question, and because we were talking about young people, and it seems like such a difficult time for young people graduating into a world where, AI is maybe taking junior level jobs, where, there's been some economic turmoil. Some sectors are doing great, but there's been like this, it's just been a really interesting period. And so, how do you recommend or advise young people just entering the corporate world, the startup world, the SMB world, especially as marketers? What should they do when they're first entering the world to really stand out and set themselves up for a great career?
Specialize, man. Like be the absolute best at your one weird, unique thing. And I mean pretty weird because marketing is so broad today. In 2003, my specialization was SEO. And that built a great career and a nice company and all that kind of stuff. That is not a specialization today, right? Like it's not unique enough. There were only a few thousand of us in SEO. So, but by being the SEO person who also had like a very transparent blog and wrote very personally about these things and did lots of experiments and whatever and went to conferences, like I could be that very unique one of only 5 or 10 people who are doing that thing at that time. And that continues to work really well. I mentioned that we're doing a lot of hiring for Snack Bar Studio, or I've been doing a small amount of hiring for Snack Bar Studio recently. I'm like finding these people who are. We hired a Spanish guy recently who's like absolute specialty is 2.5D animations of characters, attacks, movements, like the perfect exact thing. He's done it like 3 times at exactly these kinds of games that we're building. Perfect. Like he is the perfect guy. And he also, he's also a culture fit and all this kind of stuff. Great. So he's our new animator. I think that finding those specialties, like if I were in marketing world, I might say, hey, you know what I am absolutely amazing at is brand advertising, but on unusual social networks. Like I'm really good at brand on Pinterest, on Reddit, and on Threads. And there's very few people who are doing that right now. Bingo bango. Like go get it. Same thing, you could be like, oh, I'm an absolute specialist at analytics visualization for e-commerce. Great. Fantastic. Like go find your weird, unique little niche. Specialize. Don't look at the job ads and say, oh man, how do I fit all of these requirements? Build your thing, put up your little, portfolio website that shows off what you've done. Do some projects for friends, family, charities, whatever, like your own projects, great. And then show that off. Building a name inside that specialization is absolutely the way to stand out in this field.
I love that answer, and there's some really good research from that I read. I forget who it was from, but basically the notion of once you learn one thing really well, one craft really well, it sort of creates the pattern of learning in your mind, and you can apply that to other areas. But you have to get really good at one thing first. So it's like that. You have to just pick something, and that's the thing that you sacrifice in the beginning, and it's like a spear into the world, and it just opens everything up.
Yes, I love that analogy, right? Like you're kind of parting the sea of sameness to be able to stand out. And yeah, that's a superpower.
And I love that you mentioned like niche social network advertising. I think I don't think I've ever seen that role. I think you may have just come up with something totally new.
Well, I started following someone who was like a Pinterest, not performance, but Pinterest brand marketing specialist on Blue Sky. I think I started following her. And I've been learning a ton about that, how that network works and like what I might be able to do there and what I could produce. I just say, and if anybody were to ask me, I don't remember her name right now, but if anybody were to like email me and say, hey, do you know anyone who's really good at Pinterest for this and this and this? I would immediately go to Blue Sky and like, oh yeah, who is that woman who's doing all this stuff? Because that it's an easy way to stand out and build that reputation. I think that's where it's at.
It's so smart. And, there's like market validation for those ideas. I don't know if you remember when Facebook was first getting popular, someone made a blog called All Facebook. It was fine. It was just sharing news of Facebook, literally posting their press releases and their blog posts. And eventually they got acquired for, like a decent amount of money, like a few $1 million for the guy's little blog. And it was this niche thing. And it's just like, when you have this niche idea, it's like the internet is so big, someone's probably going to be interested in it, like doubly so if it's a real service that companies might use. So I love that answer, Rand. So I think that's all the time we have for today, Rand. We will put links to connect with you in the comments, but for anyone just listening, where should they go to connect with you and say hello?
So I write on the SparkToro blog, which is sparktoro.com/blog. You can get a free account and play around with the tool if you want there. I'm also quite active on LinkedIn and Blue Sky. And you can find me, Rand Fishkin, on both those places. And if you're interested in Snack Bar Studio and, playing a chef in 1960s Italy who fights magical boars in a forest and brings the pancetta back to her restaurant to cook carbonara, you can check out snackbarstudio.com.
Well, that game sounds super cool. I actually have to go look at that.
Check it out, man.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Rand, and we will see you all next week.